Hi, I'm Melissa Davis, and I read the 2016 K through 12 Horizon Report about the significant challenges. And I'm going to focus on one of the difficult challenges, which was advancing digital equity. And this one stood out to me just because, you think about how big the internet is and how common you just think everybody has it, and that's not the case. So basically, digital equity is about the uneven access to the internet for students. It could be based on where they live, it could be their socioeconomic status. There was a research that was listed where it said 5 million households with school-age children in the United States don't have high-speed internet access, and that number was just astounding to me because, like I said, you think everybody's got it. So especially with classrooms pushing the flipped classrooms, the blended learning, a lot of the teachers are encouraged to do, then you have these students who don't have high-speed internet at home. They're being left behind. And it actually called it the homework gap. And so there were a few things that people were trying to fix this. Of course, nothing's perfect. Obama tried to have a Connect All initiative to where every American can have high-speed internet by 2018. And I actually, out of curiosity, researched it to see, did it work, here in 2019, and I couldn't find a whole lot. It talked about how it did increase, but then nothing's really mentioned after 2016. So I don't know if it just went away or if it didn't go well. So that's something I was kind of interested in as well. Some internet providers are trying to help. Comcast was trying to offer $10 a month, but of course there are people who can't even afford $10 a month, so that's not a perfect plan. One alternative that I thought was interesting, there was a district in New York that basically put routers on school buses. And so kids, as they were driving home or riding home from school, they could work on their homework on the school bus. Some kids are on the bus for a long time. And so I don't know how hard that is, or how expensive it is, but I thought that was one pretty interesting idea. A few other suggestions were flexible library hours, so that kids could go to the library to try to get work done, or extending when assignments are due. So instead of giving one night, maybe giving several nights to do it in. So the kids who don't have internet access can make a plan. What are they going to do in order to do that? I know at my school, starting last year, we have Chromebooks and these little devices called Kajeets that can be checked out. So as long as the student has a signed permission slip from home, they can check these out overnight, and they can have high-speed internet with these little Kajeet devices and do everything that they could do at school. It's the same filtering program, so they can't just go and play games or get on websites that are not appropriate. It has that same blocking filtration on it. So obviously, I think even though this report is in 2016, I think we can say in 2019 it's probably still a challenge. I know I have students, and I'm at a pretty affluent school, and I have students who have told me I don't have internet at home, and it still catches me off guard whenever I hear it. And so I have to find alternatives for those students when they're not able to. Even some of them, even though we have the Chromebooks and Kajeets, their parents don't give them permission. They're nervous about bringing those things home. And even that's not perfect. But that was the article that stood out to me, or the part of the article that stood out to me.
Read something similar about also underrepresentation, gender underrepresentation.
Oh yeah.
Even though we might get high-speed internet access, girls have less access to it, and also minorities. I also read that somewhere.
Yes. So in my section, I also read 2016, but I focused on the WICKED challenges, which are like the very, very difficult challenges. And so in my section, the two things that I was focusing on were the achievement gaps and the personalized learning. And actually the achievement gaps is probably where you read that, because it talked about in the Middle East and Northern Africa that there's lack of education for children, particularly girls, just because of the gender differences, and they're not seen as equal, and so they're not valued with education, so most of them don't get it. And so that was part of the achievement gap that I read about this week. And what achievement gap is just the relationship between students and their education. And so basically, and this has really nothing to do with outside of technology, we have achievement gap just because of low socioeconomic statuses for students. And so when we look at this as classroom teachers, we can think like kids don't have access to books. Like if they don't have access to books, when they start kindergarten, they're already going to be at a disadvantage to the kids who are read to every night.
Yeah.
Or who had books, who saw those sight words, who saw those letter sounds, and their parents, read to them and they heard those things. So the achievement gap section just talked a lot about the differences in our low socioeconomic status students. And it was interesting. They did a 20-year study, the testing, U.S. Education Testing Services, and they found that investment in lower student to teacher ratio, so less kids per teacher, and higher paid teachers, those schools had less of an achievement gap with better educational outcomes for those low SES students. So there was a correlation between smaller classrooms and teachers getting paid more, and the students in that achievement gap being more connected. So that was really interesting because you wouldn't really think about that being a connection, but it was a huge connection because those teachers have time, to pull those kids because there's less of them.
Right.
And they were encouraged to be there because they were making more money. So that's not, we all can go, woohoo, yeah, let's do that. And then the other one was personalized learning, which I think for me, we all kind of know what personalized learning is. It's just the student-centered environment versus the classroom environment where learning for students is individualized. And I think probably this was 2016. So 2016, I feel like that was the buzzword. Like everything was personalized learning. And so it's interesting now because I even remember my principal, like that was a hot button issue. So everyone wanted to incorporate that. And then at one point we were like, okay, we don't really know what this is. And that's what the article talks about, is there's not really a consensus to define what personalized learning is. So everyone's kind of taken a back seat to personalized learning. And now we're kind of figuring out what adaptive learning is. What is blended learning?
Yes.
And so education has taken a huge step back to say, okay, this sounded really great in theory, but what does that actually look like in the classroom? So those were the two things I focused on. The personalized learning thing did reference back to the digital equity and the homes having access to the internet, just because some students weren't able to do the work at home.
Right.
So that was mine.
Awesome.
Thank you. And I read the 2017 Higher Education, and it focused on the different types of technologies that are not specifically made for the classroom, but that have been incorporated into the education world to help technology. And I focused on mobile learning because you think about it, everybody has cell phones these days. First graders have cell phones these days. So the higher education started to use cell phones as a way of having the students to have more interaction between students and the professors. There's even that I thought it was interesting that there's even a university in Kenya that launched a mobile program where students can graduate with a bachelor's degree from their phone. So I thought that was very interesting. It said that mobile phones have been increasing, and even it says that even though there are some places where not everyone has mobile devices, even for example in Africa, which we all know it's usually one of the lower undeveloped countries, it still has a 46% of the population. This was in 2015, that had a mobile device. So they're using mobile devices to have students more engaged in the classroom, to have them be able to talk to one another. They even stated that some students in the nursing program started using iPads to see like real body movements of muscles, and you're able to see the skeletals, the 3Ds, and through your mobile apps, through iPads, through
Wow.
all of these mobile things that you can take around with you and use them anywhere. Like, we know I have Zoom on my phone. We have Blackboard on our phone where we can do assignments too. We can check our grades. And it just makes it a lot easier for us, because we don't always, we can depend on our phone pretty much to for our education. So they said that is something that that universities were looking into, continuing using mobile learning. And it said that it was going to adapt quick within a year or less, which I think we all see it. This was in 2017. We all see people being able to do all sorts of stuff on mobile devices.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, that is also very true. All right, so I read the Horizon Report 2016 K-12 edition, and my focus was also on the significant challenges. And so I'm going to talk about the solvable ones and how they're related to one another. The first one is the authentic learning experiences, and the second one is the rethinking the roles of teachers. And we have discussed before that the authentic learning experiences, what we tend to do is to prepare our students for, being, successful in higher education and the workforce. But the challenge we face is that we are too much of a accountability, achievement-driven culture instead of true learning. We're too focused on the test results instead of the true learning. And so that is a challenge that is mentioned there. And in order to be able to provide authentic learning to our students, we need to overcome that. But it's also enforced by policy. Our policies are, fostering that culture of, if you don't meet the goal, you get your nuts. So instead of doing it for the true learning of our students. Nowadays, they are focusing more on cooperation and collaboration within the industries and, the surrounding organizations around the schools, and how they can foster a culture of internships and apprenticeships for our students in order to give them access to resources that we don't have at school, like, expensive tools and engineering companies and examples like that they don't have access at the school setting, but they can be provided through internships. And so this is only made through true collaboration with those industries. And I linked that to the ISTE standards for administrators. And so we need to provide that type of environment and to promote that type of environment as administrators. And the second one, obviously, is the rethinking the roles of teachers and how this is related to this one. Obviously, we cannot provide authentic learning experiences to our students if we don't rethink our roles as educators. We need to become more facilitators instead of being just the, delivery method of information, because that's what sometimes we do. I read something really cool and it resonated to me. We need to move from being the sage on the stage to being more like the guide on the side. And it's kind of cool because, yeah, it kind of makes sense. It rhymes and everything. So we need to move from that mentality. But unfortunately, it needs a lot of professional development and a lot of motivational theory to, to promote that change. And that's also tied to the ISTE standards for administrators, because we need to promote that as coaches and as teachers. We need to also promote that digital mentality in order to be able to, to change that mentality to provide the best education for our kiddos.